So some of you have heard this mentioned, and maybe you wondered about our the name of our camp here at World of Wisdom, the Water Bridging Camp. It's not only the way we like to look at the world, bridging between science and spirituality, but it's also an actual physical experiment. And I think I'd like to call it is any of you familiar with the experiment called the double slit experiment? So that was an experiment that was very mysterious and paradoxical. It still is, and it kind of initiated the whole quantum mechanical discussion about 100 years ago. Actually, a lot of it took place in Copenhagen. It was called the double slit experiment. I won't go through it here. We have a link to a documentary film on our camp, and it also explains about this. So what I'm going to show you here, it does say danger. It cannot kill you. First point. It can give you a shock to. So we will generate high voltage, 10,000 volts or more, which is like in the power lines. And of course, much more than the 220 or 12 that we're used to, but it's very low amperes going through current. So this one can generate 5 watts of power. 5 watts, that's basically nothing. It's like an LED lamp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pour some distilled water into these 2 glasses, and in which I have some electrodes, as you can see, connected to the power supply here. And oops. So let me just set it up. Okay. So when I turn this on, you will see 2 displays. One is showing the current in microamperes, and it will probably show anywhere between 0 and 180 microamps. This one, it will say 10, then it means 10,000 volts. And when I turn it on, you will maybe hear a little spark, and then you will see that the water will try to connect. It will try to release the tension between the 2 electrodes. And hopefully it will start forming a bridge made of pure water. And hopefully I can pull this one a little bit apart and the water will be hanging in the air. So let's start the experiment. Maybe I need a little bit more water to start with. It's trying. You see, current is 0, and it's now 16,000 volts. Try again. Oh, did you hear it? See, now there's a connection. And water is, as you know, water is its own molecule. So sometimes you get a thick bridge, which is, in this context is maybe 1 or 2 millimeters. Today we get a very thin bridge. So it's maybe 0.5 millimeter thick. And I can slowly pull out here. And now it's at least 1 centimeter. Can you all see it? Maybe 1.5. What is the voltage saying? Oh, it's probably down 9, 7. So I forgot to start asking you if you think that we know everything about water. But this experiment has a lot of, well, it was an experiment that started my journey into investigating water biology, quantum biology, I call it. But it's also, I mean, I think I even take this to when I give talks at schools, and yeah, they can listen to all my theories about water and all that. But when they see this, it's like whoa, it's so manifested in some way. Yeah. And if you have really good eyes and you get closer, don't touch anything, you can actually see that there's a movement of water going from the red to the black, but also from the black to the red. So there's movement both ways. And if you have really good eyes, you can see that it's two spirals going in opposite directions. Yeah. And where have we seen that? The double helix, yes, DNA, of course. Mm. Yes, of course. Did it respond? Ah, do they change? But this is how science used to be, right? You observe something and then you try to manipulate it or disturb it or change it. And actually, if you look into the history books, many of the scientists of the 1800s, 19th century, they actually test things out on their own bodies. Then they would put things on their tongue, and oh, if I put a battery, I call it a battery on my tongue, I get this tingling sensation. Yeah. Shouldn't do it here. Not this one. Uh, it was first demonstrated in 1890, the UK, and then it was kind of forgotten. And then another water scientist in Holland, Elmar Fuchs, I think he wrote some old papers 100 years old, and he said, "What? Is that true?" And then he reproduced it, and he built his own whole lab around it. And yeah, I mean, of course, that's the first thing you think of if putting fruit color. But fruit color is has a lot of sugar and salt, so it ruins the experiment. But if you can find some kind of inert dust, like plastic dust from a whiteboard, you can be lucky to see some dust particles here that, if we're lucky, they will be transported across. There was one. Did you see that? Mm-mm. But then it also broke the bridge, didn't it? Yeah. They can be aquaported. It's actually it seems to that sometimes there's a little bit of an unbalance. So after a while, for example, the other day we did it. After half an hour, there was a few milliliters less in one glass than the other. So, but I see, but I mean, the problem is we don't really understand what's going on. Nobody can. So, but my intuition tells me that it should be balanced. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The first time I saw it, it was in a what's called a high energy lab. So they could. I mean, I can show you this because I can. You know, uh, I asked some experts that it cannot kill us or you or me. But if you have a high security, high voltage lab, and you can crank this up. I've seen it up to 5 centimeters. Yeah, it does. Actually, no, not a beer, but a few other liquids. What's called glycerol. It acts. Um, I think, or maybe methanol also. I haven't, but you're welcome to try it. But it won't. I can almost guarantee it won't work. If we put like what we can do is, if I still have this, you can see. I can show you how stable and flexible it is. Hopefully, if we're lucky, I can restore it like this. Sometimes I can. Not this time. Um, no. But it's also like it has its own personality. Sometimes it's cooperative, sometimes it's not. Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually very flexible. Yeah. I mean, if you didn't know better, you would think I'd put some gelatin in, right, or something. Yeah. Well, I think first of all, if we are if we are going to accept any of what we've been discussing, and Jeremy has been, I mean, water cannot just be the simple molecule with H2O just swimming around randomly. There has to be something more. And if you go into homeopathy and information in water, there has to be at least two states of water to have an information system. Something representing 0 and something representing 1. So this definitely shows that water can adopt a different quote unquote structure or phase. So I think this is a good starting point. Some of my Italian friends call it coherent domains. They talk about, and I can't explain all the details, but it's like water molecules coming together, and then they share what's called electrons, and they compared. So coherence is a phenomenon we also see when birds get together in big flocks and they act like one organism. And when A good example is a laser light. A laser is coherent light, and we all know that it's different from what's called ordinary light. So coherence seems to be like a principle that is used by nature, and that gives, I call it superpowers. Maybe some of you know about the heart math technique and heart rate variability. Are you familiar with that term? That you can, if you meditate on your heart rhythm and you can get biofeedback, then you can actually have your heart rhythm go into coherence, and that's associated with a state of what would you say, Penny? It's a very healthy state, right? Yeah. I think it does. Yeah. How about zero? Well, the guest we had the other day at the water camp, Swedish professor Anders Nilsson, he's very famous in scientific circles for not studying this phenomenon, but studying water at very low temperatures. So at -30, you can actually, if you're careful enough, it will not freeze to ice. You can still keep it liquid, and he can then, with very fancy stuff, X-rays and so on, he can see that it behaves in two different ways. So he's really doing the hard work and proving it in a way that other scientists cannot refute. Whereas, as you can probably sense, and maybe you know, that motors work. I mean, in most scientific circles, that's just, they say that's woo-woo. He can measure. He compares it to if you compare oil and water, that different. So one type is much lighter than the other. High density, low density, he calls it. Yeah. Mm. Something happened. Hmm. uh, it's almost like, now I can't remember the details, but there was one guy who said, well, maybe the disease could be caused by something I call bacteria, and you can actually see them in this thing. It's called a microscope. And the others said, no, we don't believe. Come and look. No, it can be, so we don't even want to waste time looking in your microscope. Yeah. And the guy suggesting that surgeons should wash hands between going from one surgery to the next, he was also ostracized to reduce, women who died from childbirth. He was just kicked out, and it's the same old story when you. But look up Jerry Pollack that we interviewed yesterday. He's amazing. He's a really, really good starting point, but because he's so down to earth and very, very a good communicator. I use this as my, eye opener, signature experiment, whatever. I mean, the guys in Holland are much more sophisticated in investigating all these parameters and temperature and blah blah blah. But for me, it has opened my eyes to that there's something more to biology. I'm a biologist than I was trained in. I was trained in biology being small billiard balls bumping together, and if you wanted to treat a disease, you had to invent a new billiard ball that would hit the other billiard balls. But nobody talked about waves and fields and electromagnetic effects and so on. So that's the field that I'm investigating now, and I'm purposely choosing some subjects that I know are important also to the society, like multi-resistant bacteria. Can we do something about that? Stem cells, regenerative medicine. Can we do something about that? So, I mean, if we can show something there, that they cannot shoot down the results. Maybe we cannot explain it, but yeah. Mm-hmm. One of my friends in Switzerland, he's also a scientist, and then he has found out that the Koreans actually discovered that there's in addition to our blood vessels and our lymph nodes, there's also a third system, a vascular system, consisting of structured water. So he's investigating, and that really fits into the meridian theory and acupuncture. But and then you kind of, so why didn't anybody else discover that before? Because if you take a lab animal and you kill it, the water just turns from, well, it does like this. When you kill the animal, it's like this. There's no structured water anymore. So um, being well, if you watch Pollack's talks, it's much about being close to surfaces. Has a huge effect. Water is much different close to certain surfaces than if it's in the middle of what we call a bulk solution. And inside a cell, I mean, we get this picture of cell is like a balloon, and some things are floating around inside, DNA, proteins, and so on. But a cell is completely packed with biomolecules. So it means every water molecule inside it will be close to a surface. So again, the way we present things affects the way that we think about things. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's a huge field, but it's yeah. I have a friend has developed this thing here. Have any of you heard about Granda water from Austria? No. Um, have any of you heard about, maybe you had an uncle who put a big magnet on his water pipes because he had too much limescale buildup, and then he claims that it helped or it did not help. So there have been for many years have been companies claiming that they could solve these kinds of issues. And a famous one is an Austrian company called Granda. And what they do, as far as what they tell us, is that they structure water in some way, and they use water from inside a mountain in Austria, and they structure it somehow, and then it encapsulates it in a metal cylinder, and then when you put that cylinder next to your water pipe, it changes the structure of your water. Yeah. So I have a friend who's from Denmark. He works in environmental business and so on. And so he used this Austrian technology for a big air clean project in Singapore. But he said it ran out of power because there was just so huge flow. And so he said, why don't I invent my own thing? And then he came up with this that contains structured water that he has invented somehow. I don't know actually the details, and he won't tell me or anybody. And then he encapsulates this in a steel cylinder, as you can see. And when you put this or a larger version next to a pipe that has a lot of buildup, biofilm or anything, it either disappears or it reduces it dramatically. It's also described in this movie, documentary movie. So now I've done a lot of advertisement for that. I have a really hard time measuring it. I can see some electrochemical changes, but again, it's not so stable, I would say. I and my colleague have both experienced that when we brought it back home, all of a sudden, if it had been in our home for a few hours, all of a sudden, when you turned on the water in the kitchen, it came out milky white for like 10 minutes, meaning that all the buildup in the pipes just came out in one go. I mean, it's not scientific, but that's what we experienced. And the fun story in the film is that the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, I don't know if you know them, they're using these all over. So it's like they have all the fountains and the restaurants and the sewers and blah blah blah. So they have more than 100 of these installed, and that wouldn't be far-fetched. But you know, saying this to the health authorities, they would just burn you immediately. Uh, but I carry it in my pocket because this guy who invented it, when you see him also in the film, he's a big guy. His BMI is up in the red area, and so 5 years ago he was hospitalized, and he said, "Oh, Nikolai, we cannot meet because I'm in the hospital." Or what happened? Oh, I got this immense pain in my chest and my stomach, and I said, "Oh no, is it your heart?" No, fortunately, it was not my heart. It was my gallbladder. I had a gallbladder stone. Okay, that's easy to cure. Yeah, that's easy. But you know what? They did all the tests, and they checked my heart, and they scanned my heart, and then the doctor came back and said, "Hmm, well, you seem like a big guy. I think we made a mistake when we scanned your heart because your arteries was so clean. It was like a 25-year-old person. So could we please do it again?" And then he went into the scanner again, and then, well, you're doing something good. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just drinking good water, he said. So my dream is to combine all of this and finding out how can we use this, and similar. Not. I mean, I'm not involved in his company, but these principles for new treatments and healings, and maybe explaining what Reiki really is. So, yeah. Mm. But I mean, one place to start, and I'm also thinking about Gotland. I was calling the guy who invented it. Oh, do you by any chance have any customers in Gotland that we can refer to? Who has problems with, I don't know, some water problems or yeah. And he said, no, not in Scotland, but he has a lot of customers in Sweden that he can refer to. So. Yeah. What time is it? Yeah. Mm-mm. What's the next best thing? Yeah. What would you say? What? Grander water, yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's a device that they call it the vitalizing the water again. Mm. Grander, uh, grander, Grander. Grander, svenska. Larger, yeah, grander, yeah. Um, yes, yeah. You're welcome. Thank you for